Hello, I'm Kay. I'm here to help you navigate the business side of art in a way that actually makes sense. We'll decode the business lingo, unravel marketing mysteries, and pave a clear path for you to thrive both creatively and financially. So grab your favorite brush, a fresh canvas, or just a cup of coffee. Welcome to the Artist's Guide to Business. Hey guys, I already recorded and released this episode a couple weeks ago, and I was surprised to hear it when I went to play it after it was released and to find that the audio was really bad. So I took it down. And so if you did listen to that, thank you for listening through tough audio. And if you didn't, hear it. Here it is for the first time. There is this cultural mythology we've all bought into. It's that creative inspiration should just strike like lightning. And when it does, you drop everything and create. And when it doesn't, well, you just kind of wait around until it decides to show up again, wondering where is it? But here's what so many creative people and artists get wrong about creativity and productivity. Those magical flow states, those moments of deep creative work that produce our best art, they don't just happen by accident or by a lightning strike. They are cultivated, they're protected, they're taken care of, kind of like growing a plant, like a rare plant that needs very specific conditions to thrive. Your creativity needs to be cared for. Hi there, my name is Kay, and I am the host and the founder of the Artist's Guide to Business. As well, I'm an artist over at K Potter Fine Art, and I want to welcome you to this week's episode. So join me as we open up our imaginary guidebook and dive into today's main topic, protecting your studio time. Today, I'm going to share with you why deep work and flow states are the most valuable currency in your creative business, and why protecting these states is not just nice to have, but it's absolutely essential. We'll talk about the very real challenges of setting boundaries with others and with ourselves when it comes to our studio time. And we'll explore when it actually is right to break your own rules and maybe prioritize rest or relaxation or play. Because here's the reality. Your ability to consistently produce meaningful art doesn't come from sporadic bursts of inspiration. It comes from creating the conditions where deep work can happen reliably and consistently. What would change if you could access that focused, productive, creative zone whenever you needed to, not just when it randomly shows up? What would your art practice look like if you could summon that flow state almost at will? Wouldn't it look great? Of course, it's never as simple as just saying your time, is it? And that's because even though it sounds straightforward on the surface, it actually requires some uncomfortable boundaries and a total mindset shift. Let's go ahead, let's dig in today, and by the end of this episode, I'm fairly confident that you'll not only understand the neurological power of deep work, but you'll also feel empowered to create that sacred space and those boundaries around your studio time, even when it feels awkward or maybe selfish. Also, make sure you listen to the end to get your weekly single step and your point of interest. These two segments are to help you take action in your business this week, no matter what you're up to or where you're at. Okay, let's dive in. First, let's talk about what deep work actually is and why it matters so much for artists. The term deep work has been popularized and made common by computer science professor Cal Newport, and he defines deep work as a professional activity performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their limit. For artists, this is that magical zone where time seems to disappear, your technical skills and your creative vision align perfectly, and it's where your best work really emerges almost effortlessly. Neuroscience gives us some kind of fascinating insights into why this state is so powerful. When you achieve a flow state during deep work, your prefrontal cortex, or the part of your brain responsible for self-criticism and doubt, it actually becomes less active. And who doesn't love that? Am I right? This is why you feel less self-conscious and more intuitive when you're in that deep flow state and you're really in that creative flow. You know what it is. Your brain releases neurochemicals like dopamine, endorphins, norepinephrine, and these things that enhance your pattern recognition and your creative connections. Your brain is really coming to life in all the best ways when you're in these amazing flow states. But we need to make sure that we understand this state. It doesn't just happen instantly. Research shows that it takes an average of 23 minutes to reach your deep focus after any distraction. So 23 minutes. Think about how many times your phone pings in 23 minutes, or how many times someone might knock on your door, ask you for a snack, all of that. Each interruption essentially resets that 23-minute clock. And so this brings me to that often kind of invisible thing that works against studio time. It's what we all have going on right now, especially if we're constantly focusing on things like content creation while we create. When your creative time is constantly interrupted, you never reach that cognitive depth where your most original and skillful work emerges. You're limited to the kind of thinking and creating that can happen in short, disconnected bursts. It's like you're trying to swim in a puddle instead of in an ocean, and you just cannot dive deep. Let's talk a little bit about an artist that I worked with recently, and we'll call her Maya. And this is based on a few different people. It's not anyone in particular, but I've seen this pattern, and so I want to talk about it, sort of what it looks like. So she was Maya, the made-up artist. She was creating decent work, but nothing that really excited her. Her studio sessions were like 20 minutes of work, then answering texts from friends, 15 more minutes of work, then scrolling Instagram for inspiration, or just, I don't know, whenever I find a small challenge or come up against any sort of roadblock, I notice a habit I have is to grab that phone and start looking at some social media or something. It's like our brains have gotten trained to just easily divert back to the distractions. And then maybe you do another 30 minutes of work, but by then your partner pops in to ask you, what are the dinner plans? What are we going to do tonight? And so just like Maya, she wasn't really treating her studio time as this sacred space that can't be interrupted. And she could feel how this fragmentation was affecting her work, right? There was less cohesion, less depth than she knew she was capable of, and she missed that flow state. So we worked together to establish boundaries and help her transform her practice and her making of her art, right? We talked about what kind of challenges would come up for her when she was creating these boundaries. We talked about, what are the kind of rituals, or what sort of mindset things do we need to establish in order to make sure that your studio space and studio time is treated as, I say the word sacred, but I don't think it's as lofty as that. I just don't want to fall into this idea that this is some like lofty, sacred, holy thing, It's neuroscience. It's reality. This is all based in what is actually happening in our brains and on this planet. Okay. All right, let me get back on track now. So now let's talk about the reality of protecting this deep work state, because it's where the real challenge begins. And this is something that Cal Newport talked about in his book, Deep Work. I don't remember when I read it. It was so long ago, but he was making a case that the people who are going to be the most successful, or the most a skill that they will have that others don't have, is being able to not be distracted and to do deep work. And that's not referring to like ADHD distraction. It's just talking about digital distraction, or constant 15-minute meetings, or letting people come in and interrupt you at any time, right? This idea is, how do we really protect our space and our time so that we can get into that deep work? Because you know the feeling, don't you? where 3 hours goes by and you kind of come to consciousness and you're like, wow, I can't believe that I've been painting for 3 hours or making art for 3 hours. I don't even know where the time went. That is such a good feeling. The truth is, establishing boundaries around your studio time, it can often feel really uncomfortable for a lot of people, especially people who are raised as women or socialized as women. We can even feel like it's selfish. There can be this voice that says, well, who do you think you are, acting like your art is so important, right? Have you ever heard that kind of in your head? And for artists, especially who don't have substantial financial validation for their work yet, this can be particularly challenging. Okay, so let's face the most common boundary struggles head on. The first one, family and friends who may not see your creative work exactly as real work. They might call you during your studio hours or drop by unannounced or get offended if you don't immediately respond to the texts they sent you, which that's a whole nother thing. Another thing is digital distractions, the endless scroll, email checking, just a quick peek at social media that turns into 40 minutes down the rabbit hole and you don't even know what you've been reading or consuming. And then there's a third boundary issue. I find this one is very hard for myself, and it is the boundary with yourself. It's when you've said, I'm going to take all of a Tuesday afternoon, I'm going to use it as studio time. And then when Tuesday comes, you suddenly are like, you know what? I'm actually pretty tired, or I really should organize my tax receipts instead, or my friend asked if I wanted to get ice cream, and that does sound way more fun than facing this difficult piece of art I'm working on. That internal boundary violation, it totally happens when we haven't like fully embraced our identity as professional artists who show up to work, not just when they're inspired or when it's easy, but when we've committed to being there. You want to see it as the equivalent of calling in sick to your job. Someone else is paying you or someone else expects you to be there. I want you to think of it that way. It's like you're calling in sick just because you don't feel like it that day or because you want some ice cream. And so, yeah, I think that brings me to one of these really transformative mindset shifts that you make as a professional artist. You start treating your studio hours like a job that you clock into. Maybe it's a pretty fun job, sometimes super challenging, but it is a job that you really got to show up for. And so what does it look like, in practice, right? I mean, listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm someone whose energy fluctuates. My ability to focus fluctuates. My emotions are left, right, out to space I don't know. They're just all over the place. So this is all, coming from someone who is neurodivergent and who is aware of like toxic hustle culture and has been breaking herself of that for a long time. But there's a bound, or this is more about creating that expectation and setting that boundary to give yourself something, not to punish yourself, not to shame yourself and say, hey, you need to show up to this job. You know what I mean? That is not the vibe I'm going for. But I'm trying to find an equivalent outside of yourself and outside of art that you can use to hold on to get your deep work and your studio time. And so the thing we can all relate to, or the thing that's closest, is having a job that you have to clock into. That's an easy thing to understand, to reach for, to pull it back and say, yep, I'm going to treat this just like I would if I had to go serve at a restaurant or if I had to go do whatever. Okay. And then what does it look like when we start doing this? It means that you've scheduled your studio time on your calendar. You write it in. Studio time from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock on Thursday. You show up at 1 p.m. You don't show up at 1:30. You don't say, I just want to check out Instagram a little bit longer. I'm going to be here till 1:30, then I'll get to my studio. No, you want to show up at 1 p.m. because you told your boss or yourself that you were going to. And even if you're not feeling particularly inspired, you still want to show up. How many times have you ever gone to a job when you're not in the best mood? Probably a lot. Maybe you're tired. Maybe something's going on in your life, whatever. You still show up to your job, because if you don't, you're going to lose it. Even if you'd rather be doing something or anything else, you want to stick to those times. Because professional artists, they understand something that amateurs don't. This is really important. If you're kind of focused somewhere else, come back for a second. This is proven. This is documented before we were scanning brains. This is knowledge. And the knowledge is this: inspiration often follows action, not the other way around. Yes, there are times when you will be really inspired and it'll get you to take action. And those times are wonderful. They're so special. But for the most part, inspiration, it often follows action. It wants to find you working. You don't want to wait to feel inspired and then go to the studio. You go to the studio and then the inspiration shows up. And maybe it's not immediate. Maybe it's not totally reliable. But probably you'll make it happen more often when you set the conditions for it. I had a friend who had a beautiful breakthrough when she started treating her studio like that. She found out that those first 20 minutes of settling in were really hard. She's told me she felt resistant or distracted, maybe uncertain about if she really wanted to be there or not. But then as she continued to do it, she learned that if she just kept showing up and moving her hands, mixing colors, getting into it, starting something that's not the big project right away, preparing canvases, cleaning brushes, something shifts. And then suddenly it's 3 hours later and she's made her work that she didn't expect or plan on as she came in. And that's the counterintuitive truth about creative work. Sometimes the greatest acts of artistic freedom actually come from imposing structure, limits, or discipline on ourselves. Think about how so many artists love to limit their palette. It's because when you have any sort of restriction, you can create within that and it becomes restrictionless. Pablo Picasso is famous for having said, "Inspiration exists, but it must find you working." You know, I have some feelings about Picasso. So if he said that, I think he was pretty prolific. Okay. Now, before you start beating yourself up and scheduling yourself studio time and then being like, Kay said I have to be here, and sleep depriving yourself and overworking, I do want to talk about one vital exception to all of this, and that is getting yourself some rest. Okay? There is a critical distinction between avoiding things and then a genuine need for rest. And conflating the two is where many of us go wrong. It's a lifelong journey for me. But avoidance feels more like restlessness. You're just kind of checking your phone, suddenly remembering other tasks that seem urgent all of a sudden. It can come with a subtle feeling of shame or discomfort or rebellion. I don't want to. I'm going to go. You know what I mean? That kind of feeling. Those show more of just kind of you're avoiding things. Or if every time you start thinking about a project you want to work on, you all of a sudden find yourself on Instagram, that's avoidance. And I know it well. I'm sure a lot of you do. And can you relate? What are some other things that you might notice as avoidance? Snacking. All of a sudden you're making popcorn and turning it into kettle corn and all of this. You're just snacking. That can be avoidance too. Or just overindulging in your friendships or your relationships. Oh, well, I really do need to call so-and-so when you could probably call them this afternoon instead. Those are kind of those avoidant measures. Or this is very popular for artists, finding other work to do. I really got to update my website, which you might have to, like you might need to, but you don't want to do that during your scheduled studio time. Or, oh, I want to make this art, but before I make it, I have to do this, this, and this to get myself to a place where I can make that art. That's all kind of avoidance. Well, you know, that could also be like that easy step in too, but you know what I'm saying. Start noticing it in yourself when you're avoiding things. What kind of habits do you do? Because then you can pick up on them. Whereas there is times when you really need rest. And when you need rest, when you're tired, when your creative output is too far, you need to bring it all in. You need to give your brain a break. You need to give your heart a break. You need to give your body a break. That will often feel more like a solid heaviness or like a brain fog where you just can't quite think through things. It's like your creative well has been completely run dry. You'll notice it and you'll feel it. And it can be really hard because sometimes you'll feel that and you'll think, am I just trying to find an excuse? Am I just whatever? Am I just avoiding this? Am I just being lazy? So that can actually be really hard for us to realize that we need rest when we're in that mode because our, at least American society, is so pro working yourself to the bone. And so you have to learn that yourself a little bit. When do you need rest? What does it look like? And then how do you allow yourself to do it? So when you need rest, let's be really clear, you gotta take rest. The creative process demands periods of recovery and regeneration. So if you don't get adequate rest, your art suffers, your health suffers, and ironically, your productivity over the long term will actually suffer dramatically. And the research on this is pretty unambiguous. Studies of elite performers across disciplines show that sustainable output requires rhythmic oscillation between intense focus and complete recovery. Your nervous system cannot sustain just continuous creative output without replenishment. Like we said, how do we distinguish between avoidance and our genuine need for rest? Pay attention to your patterns, not just your moments. If you find yourself needing rest every single time you face a challenging project, that sounds more like avoidance, right? Or if you've been consistently showing up and all of a sudden you feel unusually uninspired or depleted, that might be a genuine need for recovery. All sorts of different neurodivergence, brain types, all of it. If you have ADHD, if you are somewhere on the autistic spectrum, things like that, there are a lot of processes in your brain happening all the time just for existing in this world. And so sometimes you might need rest and really not know why. I'm all of a sudden this whole thing has been about protecting your studio time, but now I'm also making a case for rest. It's really important because it's the other side of the coin. You can't have one without the other. So you got to pay attention. Anyway, also, if you're finding yourself exhausted all the time, anytime studio time comes up, check what else you're doing with your life, because there might be other things you're doing that are causing you to have such a strong output that you're not able to bring that to your studio. Does that make sense? Where is your energy getting used? Where is it going out? And then if that energy is being sent somewhere else and not used in your studio, let's find those leaks and let's patch them up. That's how we got to kind of do it, because otherwise you're going to live your whole life just expending energy unintentionally. Okay. All right. I do want to talk about too. There's this really great advice I got from a glass artist. Her name's Becky. She's awesome. I haven't talked to her in a long time, but her advice to all of us, she was kind of mentoring a group of artists, and I want to share it with you. She implemented what she called the 15-minute rule, or the beginning rule. If she doesn't feel like going to her studio, she'll commit to just 15 minutes of a low level, low energy, low need task. If she's genuinely trying to do something for 15 minutes and then she still feels resistance, she'll try switching to a different creative task for another 15. And if after those 2 attempts, she's still totally blocked, that's maybe a signal that it's time for rest. Or, hey, I did my best and I'm going to step away without a lot of guilt around that. So for her specifically, it was about getting in there. She would just start breaking these pieces of glass because she needed little shards and shapes and stuff. And that was so low energy, low mentality. She could just get in there with her hands and start working without having to bring a whole bunch of energy, a whole bunch of creative insight or thought forward. And that was enough to get her kind of in the flow and get her start moving. I've talked to another artist who I love, and she starts with a giant watercolor paper divided by tape into squares, and then she just makes totally random compositions on those squares. No pressure. These aren't going anywhere. They're not meant to be good. And it gets her in the flow. It gets her brain activated, and it gets her started. This is kind of what you want to focus on when you're finding yourself creating those studio times. This is how you do it. This is the mark of a mature creative professional is when I don't feel like working, what do I do? How do I manage it? Okay? Because again, if you're mature, if you've done this for long enough, you know that you need rest to be sustainable. But you also know that you have to work with your brain to get yourself working in your studio time. All right, so that's all if we're in the studio. But how do we make the transition from the outside world to the studio time? One way is that you can create really clear signals to your brain and to other people that you are entering your studio, your creative space. Maybe you have a specific playlist that you only listen to when you're doing deep work. You have an apron that you put on. You have a simple ritual like lighting a candle before you begin. Or maybe you put on do not disturb on your phone, close your door with a hey, I'm creating, please do not disturb sign on the front of it. All of these things are indicating to your brain, hey, we're about to go do some deep work. Okay. The other thing you need to do is you need to manage other people's expectations of this time and of this work. You need to help them understand that it's crucial. You want to have conversations ahead of time. Tell your family or your friends or whoever might need things from you. Hey, I'm going to have studio time on Thursday, 1 to 4. And during that time, I'm essentially going to be unavailable. Or if you have roommates, hey, when I close this door, I'm working away. If you really need me, if it's an emergency, okay. But other than that, this is non-negotiable work time and I can't split away from it. That's how you kind of manage these things. This is where it comes in handy, again, to use this idea of a job. If you are going to a job from 9 to 5 every day, you don't have people running up to you and asking you for help, or your friends don't expect you to just interact with them on a moment's notice because they know you're at work. They know there are boundaries set. You are the person, though, who is now creating those boundaries and setting them up. And if you approach it with that kind of respect and that kind of mindset, the way you think about it will emulate and other people will begin to understand it too. Does that make sense? All right. There's some other things we can do around this too. Things like if you need to respond to emails or you need to respond to clients, set times to batch that process. Instead of constantly watching your inbox and constantly paying attention, oh gosh, this person emailed me, I need to respond. I need to do this for them. Cal Newport talked about this in his book. They'll start their day going to their email inbox, and that is a total risk because what you might get from there is a to-do list that you did not plan on. He suggests, hey, make it really intentional. Only go to your email when you are prepared to answer things, when you have time to batch it so you can do a bunch of responses at once. That way you're not getting yourself into this like responsive to-do list that somebody else is essentially creating for you. Let people know too. You can tell them, hey, I respond to emails on Tuesdays and Thursdays. This is your business. You're allowed to do whatever you want, right? And then the last thing to really think about around protecting your studio time. And if you're listening to all of this and you're thinking to yourself like, man, I got to get serious. Like, I really got to make myself do this. If you're thinking that way, let me illuminate something for you. Our society, at least again in the United States, likes to tell us that we can achieve anything through strength of willpower. If you have enough willpower, you'll do the things you say you do or want to do. And if you don't do them, it's your own fault because you didn't have strong enough willpower or something. Willpower is finite. You do not have endless reserves of willpower. That's why it is so much easier to say no to the chocolate and the candy in the morning than it is to say no to the chocolate and the candy at 7 p.m. at night. Over the day, and I read this somewhere, don't quote me on it, but you could look it up if you want. Over an entire day, our brains make 30,000 decisions. Isn't that insane? And if you're an artist who is actively creating a piece of art, you're making a lot more, because every brushstroke, essentially, or every color choice, or every, thing you add to your sculpture, all of it is a choice that you're making, a decision you're making. And over time, you get into what's called decision fatigue. Okay. So that means that when we're scheduling our studio time, you want to schedule it for your peak energy hours. Don't do it when you're going to already be exhausted from everything else. Some people really can get into this flow state in the evening or the later hours because nobody's asking things of them at that time. And so it kind of gives them that time and that space to really move into it. Whereas someone like me, guys, I'm done every day at 3. I mean, I can go past that, but reliably, my brain can only do pretty low level tasks after 3 p.m. I wake up really early, and those are my hours. If I spend 7, 10, or 7 to noon painting, those are my biggest hours for my brain. And so I am more likely to take on the challenge of getting myself into that work state and getting myself into the studio and quieting all the distractions around me. That is more likely to happen early in the day for me than it is later in the day. So I schedule studio time for early in the day. And then outside of that, everything is kind of softer tasks, not big tasks, not I'm going to update my website and do studio time today, because that would be too much. You want to be strategic in how you lay out this plan so that you are not requiring willpower to make it happen. You're setting yourself up for success by giving yourself the best timing, plenty of buffer between other stressful activities. Maybe you're saying no to other stressful activities. That's something I think is very positive to do. Okay, things like that. All right. And then the last thing I think that we want to really focus on after you do all of this is to actually schedule recovery time. So block off the time for you to rest, play, go outside, watch your favorite shows, play video games, do things that are not productive. Contrary to popular belief, that kind of rest and that kind of play, time off, is not a luxury for artists. It's absolutely essential for inputs and for sustainable creativity. I mean, I literally used to use naps strategically. I would be working, and then if I took a 20-minute nap, I'd come out of that nap and I would know exactly what brushstroke I needed to do next. Or if I'd go to sleep at night, I'd wake up in the morning and know what my project needed next. That's just indication that letting your brain shut down, letting it do things that are fun, engaging, interesting, fulfilling, not necessarily productive, that is all part of your process. You have to do it for your job. That's what I'm saying. You have to rest for your job. It's crazy, right? It's hard. This is hard stuff to really integrate into your life. But if you can focus on it and work towards it, it'll make a big difference in how much you actually achieve. And again, not just about achievement, but really how you're intentional about how you approach your life, I guess, and your art business. Because the goal here is not to just become a factory creative machine with no life outside of your studio. It's to create your conditions that are where your best work can emerge consistently. Let's wrap up this main section with a powerful kind of like reframe that has helped a lot of people. Protecting your studio time is not an act of selfishness or an act of thinking you're better than you are. It is an act of service. When you honor your creative work by giving it the focus and energy that it deserves, you're serving not just yourself, but everyone else who will be impacted or moved or challenged or delighted by the art that you make. I want you to think about an artist whose work really matters to you, who made an impact in your life, who you love seeing their work come to life. You like seeing it when they send you an email. You love seeing it out in life. Think about that art and how positive it is for you. And then think about if that person never went to the studio? What would be lost? Right? So going to your studio isn't selfish. It's an act of service. You're creating art that matters, no matter what it is. Your art matters. And so by extension, the conditions that allow you to make your best art matter also. And we want to architect them. All right? All right. Now, it's time for the part of the show where I can give you a couple quick practical things to actually do this week in your business. So if you're new here, this portion of the show is quick, but I want to include it because I always want you to get practical, accessible, and easy to apply ideas from us. While the main topic may be a deep dive or a bit theoretical, this section or portion gives you actual real life ideas that you can use today. Okay? First, let's go to one single step where we share a small but meaningful action that you can take this week to keep yourself moving down your path. Because in the artist's journey, small actions taken consistently will always build something powerful. This week, your single step is to take fresh photos of 3 pieces of your artwork in good natural lighting. Now, this might seem simple, but having high quality current images of your work is essential for everything from social media to gallery submissions, contests, to just feeling proud. Choose pieces you haven't photographed recently or that could benefit from better documentation. Maybe you just finished them. Morning or afternoon light tends to work best. You just want to avoid direct sunlight or avoid yellow indoor lights. Essentially, get yourself outdoors if you can, in the shade of your house or something like that. So it's very diffused, natural lighting in the early afternoon. And then, take a couple good shots with your cell phone. Okay? And remember, even these small actions over time will compound and add up to something great. That's your task for this week. Our next practical segment is the point of interest of the week. This is a spot in your journey where you can pause and create a point of interest for your fans and your collectors. I'll give you a quick prompt to inspire content for you to share with your friends, family, fans, and collectors. And then you use it to write your weekly email, your blog, social media posts, wherever you stay visible and engaged. This week's prompt or point of interest is to create a color story post explaining your palette choices in a recent piece of work you did. Share the inspiration behind your color selections, how they create mood or meaning in a piece, how you have developed your distinctive pattern over time. Just talk about your color story and why you use color the way you do and how you do. This is something that's really fun for collectors because they find more interest in it. If you just say, yeah, it just chose blue because, I don't know, I like blue. All right. But if you choose blue because you saw an especially cool mountain peak that was really blue in the distance on this particular day with the sun out, and you really appreciated how it hit the green of the landscape and blah, blah, blah. And now you're making an elk out of it. Like get a little bit more in depth. Or I choose to limit my palette because blah, blah, blah. Just talk about it. There is no right or wrong thing to say is what I'm trying to say. Just talk about it. Share your inspiration behind your art. That's your point of interest this week. Talk about your colors. All right. And then, yeah, guys, I think we're all finished. Last thoughts as we kind of close out this week's episode. Yeah, I want to take a moment to thank Wild Ozark Art for their lovely review on Apple Podcasts. She said, after listening to the episode on email automation, I'm inspired to revamp my onboarding. Practical information from real life experience that's pertinent to my specific line of business. Thank you. Thank you, Wild Ozark. I really appreciate it. Because truly, reviews like this, they mean the world to me. They help other artists discover this podcast. And if you're enjoying the Artist's Guide to Business, please leave a review if you have a moment, just even a 5-star rating. Especially if you're on Apple Podcasts, they make a big difference. It's Podcasts are especially hard to reach new audience people and new artists, and reviews really make a big difference. If you've been enjoying this, please leave one. Okay. All right, you guys, remember, protecting your creative time isn't selfish. It is the foundation that allows you to create work that matters. You deserve to give your art and your creativity all the conditions it needs to thrive, and the world deserves for you to do that too. And that wraps up another episode of The Artist's Guide to Business. I hope you found insights that resonate with you and your business and will help you on your artistic journey. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our podcast, leave a review, and share it with your fellow artists. Your support truly makes a difference and helps us reach more creative minds like yours. And we're all in this together. We'll see you next week. And until then, keep creating, keep dreaming, and remember your art has a place in this world.